Welcome to the Cryptowriter podcast, where we track down the brightest and most interesting minds in the crypto space. I'm your host for the day, Brandon Lovejoy, and once again, we are joined by the one and only Dan Larimer, a computer programmer turned blockchain pioneer, economist, game theorist, freedom engineer, and entrepreneur. Larimer is the architect of BitShares, Steem, and the EOS blockchains. How are you doing today, Dan?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. So today we wanted to talk about your new project, Clarion, or ClarionOS. Give us the bird's eye view. What is Clarion?
Clarion is an attempt to re-enable free speech, to allow anyone in the world to communicate with anyone else who wants to listen to them. The way I imagine it is, imagine we had a magical technological box that would allow you to broadcast a radio signal that anyone else in the world could subscribe to and hear what you have to say. And that you could use that same box to subscribe to as many other people as you want to hear what they have to say. Now, that would be direct person-to-person communication. And that's sort of the idealized form of what I'm hoping to create with Clarion, except instead of a magic box that's violating the laws of physics as we know them, it would be done through repeaters. You'd relay messages through your friends and family. So you'd establish direct connections to their computers, to their phones, and it will relay from them to everyone else. So you could imagine it as a friend-to-friend network that allows you to communicate to millions of people without having to rely on centralized services, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. And I think the main thing that makes it different from other, quote, decentralized systems like Mastodon or Matrix, whatnot, is that it's not federated. And I can go into more details on what that means.
Yeah, that was my next question. So a lot of people, when they learned you were working on a new project, they thought, well, why don't you work on this project with all these other people that are doing quote unquote similar projects in the space, such as Mastodon or Diaspora or what have you. So yeah, what makes it different? And yeah, explain the federated versus non-federated for us.
Sure. So federated system, the most widely known example of that is email. Email is in theory decentralized. You can email anyone in the world from any email address, and you can host your own email server, and that's in theory decentralized, right? Because anyone can get their own email. But in reality, you don't own your email address. You have an account with a service, whether it's Google or Apple or Microsoft or Proton Mail or whatever. And if that service goes down, your identity, your email disappears with it. It's a similar process with Mastodon and Matrix and the like, is you've got an identity, but it's tightly coupled with a particular service provider. And there's only so many service providers out there. And if they don't want to talk to each other, then your messages actually don't relay. So if you've got a Republican Mastodon node and a Democrat Mastodon node, and they decide they don't like each other, they won't connect, and the two user bases can't communicate. Some of these systems have ways that, in theory, you can export your account information and import it somewhere else, but you lose a lot of information. You lose a lot of your followers and your routing information. So there's no really truly decentralized system that allows you to own your identity, because your identity is controlled by private keys. You're the only one that can sign messages. And you can send your messages through any number of channels, right? You can have service providers like a Google or an Apple that will relay your messages for you. And you can use multiple of them simultaneously for one identity. But you don't even have to use a service provider. You can do it entirely with your friends and family. So if you know anyone in your family that is really good with computers, they want to run a node on their computer, they can do that. And the idea with Clarion is that eventually you can download an app, you can double click it and just run it on your computer. And when your computer's on, it's facilitating messages for the network. And when it goes off, that's not a problem because everyone else who was relying on your computer actually has multiple other alternatives for relaying messages. So that's the difference between a federated model and the decentralized model that's presented by Clarion.
So is it a bit like the approach that BitTorrent takes in terms of content propagating through the network, or how is it that with friends and family hosting nodes, how is it that you ensure that your stuff is always online if you're not always online?
Sure. So there's a big difference between BitTorrent and Clarion. With BitTorrent, you're randomly connecting to other peers that want the same content. Now, the good news about that is you're only getting content that you're interested in. Bad news is you're connecting to people you don't necessarily trust. It's different than other protocols like IPFS. With IPFS, you've got to host your own node or pay someone to host your content. So even though it's universally addressable, you get the same file name anywhere. If your node's not online and there's no one else who's downloaded it with a node online, then your content's not going to be available, and there's a lot of overhead to maintain that availability. But with Clarion, when you send a message, you push it to your friends and family. You don't have to pay them, right? They're your friends, right? You can extend them some space on your computer, and you trust them to not upload illegal content or anything that you don't want on your computer, or they wouldn't be your friend or family. And if you don't trust your friend or family, then you don't invite them to actually be your friend and family on Clarion, even if they are in real life. So you push it out to your friends and family, and if they know anyone who's interested in following you, they will relay it to their friends and family that are interested in following you, and so on and so forth throughout the network. So, assuming you have more than one friend in the world, you always have people that you can start propagating your messages to. And if you're not online and you want to receive, say, a private message, people can send the private message to your friends, and when you come online, you download it from your friends. And in that way, there's always ability to communicate with someone, even if their phone's offline for a while, their laptop's out of power. You don't need to have an always-on internet connection.
Cool. So it uses a friend of a friend sort of network topology of sorts, I suppose. And then say I want to keep up on, say Elon Musk wants to use this and I want to connect with Elon Musk, but I don't myself know Elon Musk. How do I connect? How do I follow what he's doing?
Sure. So hopefully you've got friends who have friends who are friends with Elon Musk, right? There's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? It's the whole game that, if you actually follow your social network, on average, it's at most 6 hops, or I say on average at most, that's a contradiction. On average, it's 6 hops between you and anyone else. Some people, it might be 1 hop or 2 hops. So if you have someone who's a celebrity like Elon Musk, there's going to be a lot of people that are interested in following him. So all you have to do is know someone who's following him, who knows somebody who's following him, who knows someone who's a friend, right? And the bigger a celebrity they are, the more likely that people will gossip about what they say. So Elon says, funding secured, and he pushes that to all his friends. All his friends say, they have lots of friends that know that they're friends with Elon and they want to follow Elon. So they say, hey, Elon said funding secured, and then just it propagates through the network. And any messages propagate based upon interactions, positive interactions. So if your friends like something that they see someone else say, you'll see it too, even if you're not following someone, right? So how do you discover Elon in the first place? Well, your friend likes when he says funding secured, and the next thing you know, you see that your friend liked it. And then you see, oh, who do you like? You like this message from Elon Musk. Who's Elon? Maybe I'll follow him. You follow him. Now your friend knows, hey, anything else you see from Elon, send it my way. And then anything Elon likes or whatnot starts propagating your way.
So in a nutshell, the difference between a friend and somebody you follow is just the directness of the connection or the mutual trust.
Yeah, so what I call a friend is more like a user. There's somebody that you've given an account on your computer, which means they have permission to store content on your computer, to use your computer as their server, if you will. So if you were doing this like a business, Google and Apple might be your quote friends, and assuming they were running a Clarion server. And anytime you send a message, you push it to them. Anytime someone wants to send you a message, they can give it to either Google or Apple, and then you'll get it. But they're basically given permission to utilize resources on your computer. And it doesn't have to be mutual, right? Someone might friend you, but you might not friend them back, which means you can use their computer, but they can't use yours, and vice versa. It's just really about who do you trust to publish, and who are you going to allow to utilize your computer as an always-on node, as a temporary storage of their entire account information.
Awesome. So one other thing I heard earlier when you were talking is that Clarion uses private key encryption, similar to blockchain, in order to secure your identity or allow you to sign the transactions. So only you can sign your posts. How does Clarion, or do you foresee Clarion solving the problem of usability? We've seen key management being kind of a problem in the blockchain space. So, how do you wrap this into social in a way that it's easy for, your aunt and uncle to use?
Sure. When you download the app, it's going to generate a password for you, ask you to store it in your password manager. Initially, the app is just a website. You find somebody that's hosting the Clarion interface, you load it on your phone, and it'll just save it right directly to your password manager on your phone. And from there, you can upgrade it to a progressive web app, which would be installed on the home screen of your phone or on your computer. And that will give you longer term storage and the like. But your password would still be kept. Your password is also your private key. It would be stored in your password manager, where it should be relatively secure, assuming you've got a good security on your password manager, which you should. And people should be familiar with that. From that point forward, you can sign your messages and everything is good. Now, what happens if, say, your key is compromised or you forget your key? You'd have to create a new account, a new key, and have it endorsed by your friends and family as, oh, yes, this is the same person. And then people can set up to automatically follow your new account. You can import all your information from your old account because you download that from other people that know about it, and you're back up and running with a new key, a new identity. And it's all secured by your friends and family. Because identity here is not absolute. It's not based upon government IDs. It's based upon relationships. And it's based upon cryptographic attestations of those relationships.
So if a key is compromised or if a password is lost, and in the way that Clarion is set up using a sort of trusted network of friends, wouldn't it be ideally suited to create sort of a multi-sig password recovery setup, or is that just too complex? Is it just easier to just start?
At the end of the day, password recovery means somebody has to have your password. You can do multi-sig on an account to control authorization of who's allowed to publish to an account, and that's a way of securing your account. But from a usability perspective, that's not the most practical. But your account recovery, the updating of your account, could be done through multi-sig and say, yeah, I'm changing my new key. My friends and family have signed off on the change, and now it's updated. And if anyone suspects that an account is compromised, if their key is stolen, they can use their key to sign a revocation and propagate it to say, hey, that key's dead, don't trust it anymore. And then the hacker is unable to broadcast, and your friends and family can now endorse a new key for you.
Got it. And you mentioned progressive web apps. Tell us what a progressive web app is for those who don't know,
Sure.
and why that's crucial to Clarion, and how did you, what led you down that path?
So progressive web app was originally conceived back in when they introduced the iPhone, and they didn't have native apps on the iPhone. They didn't have an app store. The idea was that you could create a web page with HTML5 and JavaScript and build your app there. You can just install those on your home screen. Progressive web apps have a little bit of additional power over in the browser. They've got their own storage. They're a little bit more trusted, but fundamentally they're an app written in web technologies. It doesn't need to go through an app store, and it will work on all devices. So you can use the exact same interface in your browser and then progressively upgrade it to a native experience, which means you can use it offline. You no longer need to have connection to the server. So let's say that you initially have your account through, let's say Clarion.com, right? And so you install the app. You've got Clarion.com on your phone, and let's say Clarion.com goes down. You can still use your app, and through WebSockets, it will connect to other peers, other domains, other full nodes that it's able to reach, and so you'll still get your messages. You'll still be able to receive, even though the website that originally hosted the app is no longer available.
A lot of people are wondering how Clarion and what could be some points of synergy between Clarion and EOS.
Yeah, well, EOS has a major challenge in how do you create new accounts on EOS? Because you need to know someone with an account, you need to exchange public keys, and they need to pay to create an account on the network. And that's really a bottleneck for signing up to EOS. With Clarion, you don't need to have a blockchain that you have to register your account with. So you can download the app, create an account, and it's already set up to invite friends and to kind of exchange this key information, which means that we can, with the push of a button, create an EOS account for a friend on the Clarion network, because it uses the exact same keys that you would use for your Clarion account. And then the Clarion Progressive Web App can connect to EOS API endpoints to do token transfers, to register globally unique names so that you don't have whatever pseudonym or label that you've assigned to your friends and family. And so you can start to integrate those types of services with Clarion as a purely optional, right? The EOS blockchain is not mandatory, but there's a lot of synergy to EOS in having integration with Clarion. It can solve a lot of the usability problems with EOS. And also as people adopt Clarion as an alternative to Twitter and Facebook, they are automatically introduced to EOS. So it's a win-win situation.
A social platform that dovetails into the EOS sphere, but it wouldn't be limited to EOS necessarily either. And
correct.
And you said before,
it can integrate with all blockchains.
Right, and Clarion is fundamentally doesn't have its own token, correct?
It does not have a token. It's not a blockchain. See, the challenge with blockchains is that it requires everyone to process every message, and that doesn't scale. It doesn't scale in a decentralized way that we would like, in a logically decentralized way, right? It might be politically decentralized using token holder votes. It might be geographically decentralized by having many nodes on many continents. But logically, there is a single thread of events with a particular order, and you're either in it or you're not in it, right? That in that sense, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or EOS, you're logically centralized. But with Clarion, you and I could be using Clarion, and two other people could be using Clarion. They might have zero connectivity between them, but we're both using Clarion. And if one of us were to connect, it would seamlessly integrate. Whereas with the blockchain, you might start off with one chain, and then you have a chain split. But after the chain split, if if there's any conflicts, they can't be merged back in, right? It's so with Clarion, there's never any conflicts. It's just a gossip protocol combined with an algorithm that's run on your device to take in all that gossip and present an experience to the user of who said what, when, who likes what, and then on-device local AI and algorithms to make recommendations to you. So you're not leaking data to the cloud. No one knows what you're actually seeing unless you choose to broadcast the things you like to your friends and family. So it's being logically decentralized is fundamental for lower level than even blockchain, because the purpose of blockchain is to be a tool to help a group of people reach consensus. And they reach consensus on the order of events and a deterministic way of interpreting those events. Well, the lower level of consensus is, how do I communicate? How do I find people? How do we have a discussion? How do we make sure that we can even agree on which blockchain to use, which token to use, right? All the subjective messiness of the world is achieved through communication. And if all communication has to be funneled through a centralized provider, then all of a sudden, you say EOS and your tweet is banned, right? You can't talk about EOS on Twitter. I'm not saying that's happened yet, but it'd be very easy. You use the word blockchain, banned. All of a sudden, you can't discuss the tools you need to reach consensus if you don't have a tool like Clarion at the base layer.
Cool. Yeah, and I'd like to get in a little bit more to the social, philosophical underpinnings of a lot of this. But real quick, one question that I just got on Telegram, in the Clarion Telegram group, which relates to what we're talking about now, but maybe in a way I don't fully understand. They say, if I were a Clarion user that wanted to leverage blockchain tech, what would be the incentives and or efficiencies gained by using EOS mainnet versus, say, a POB, I think that's proof of burn chain, as Dan has mentioned?
Sure. So part of Clarion phase 2 would be to introduce a new kind of blockchain. I call it proof of burn, but it's not proof of burn in the traditional way. The idea is that instead of having positive block rewards like you might have on Bitcoin, where every block creates new coins, in order to produce a block, you have to burn coins or burn tokens. And whichever blockchain, whichever fork of the chain has burned the most tokens is the best fork. And what that means, the principle there is that if a blockchain is viewed as a radio station, it has got only so much bandwidth, only so much time on the air. You've got to figure out, are you going to allocate it to this ad or that ad or this song, right? And you either have a DJ that's centralized, that's saying, all right, you're allowed, you're not, or proof of work is, oh, you burned a lot of electricity, so your song goes on, some kind of lottery randomness mixed in there, or DPoS, right? All right, we've got 21 DJs. They're each taking turns figuring out who gets to include songs on the air in kind of a time sharing way. But with proof of burn, it's who's ever willing to spend the most, because it's a scarce resource. And you want it to go to the person who wants it. And who do you want to benefit from it? All the people who aren't broadcasting, all the other people who are refraining from speaking should benefit when someone is speaking on the public channel. And so it's more decentralized than proof of work, because the only way that you can keep speaking forever is to keep buying tokens from the market, pushing the price up, which means you have to have a lot of money to keep it up. And eventually, if you run out of money, somebody else gets to go on the air and start talking. And so censorship can't last forever. There's not the waste that you see with proof of work. There's not a need to have a technological infrastructure or capability, access to ASICs, access to cheap power. If you've got economic resources, you can get on the air, broadcast a single block, get off the air. But Bitcoin, you can't buy a bunch of mining equipment, mine a single block, and then leave. Right? It's a long-term commitment to get your money back and to get your message out there. So with Clarion, the goal is to allow everyone to run it on their own computers. So instead of having one chain processing 10,000 transactions per second, you have 1,000 chains doing 10 transactions per second, or 1 transaction per second. And then you selectively pick which chain you want to follow, right? If you look at your typical Telegram channel, there's only about 1 message a second. If it's going any faster than that, you can't follow it anymore, right? So we set it up so that you can do many-to-many broadcasts on public channels with spam prevention and still being decentralized so that people can run these blockchains on their home computer. The downside to this proof of burn consensus algorithm is that it's slower. It's more like proof of work, where you've got 1 block every 15 seconds to a minute instead of half-second blocks like you have on EOS. So the Clarion UI would integrate with EOS through public API nodes provided by the block producers. And if those API nodes are not there, then those UI elements would not function. Whereas a Clarion proof of burn chain, you just synchronize to the proof of burn blockchains that you want to listen to, and then you have a full node, and your UI can interact with it without requiring any API nodes or any other infrastructure. And then you get the blocks and everything are just propagating across the friend-to-friend network. So it's basically you're following a blockchain.
Under a proof of burn scenario, what sort of token emission method is there? Like, how do tokens come into existence? And are we talking about multiple proof of burn chains, or?
Yeah, like I said earlier, thousands of chains potentially. You have to have initial tokens somehow. Somebody is given 100% of the tokens, and then they distribute them how they want. They could do an airdrop on all EOS holders. They could do an airdrop on BTC holders, whatever community that they want to give the power to communicate on this particular channel. I'm using channel like a blockchain as a radio station, right? Mm-hmm. So, you figure out who you want to have the power to communicate on it, and then they can sell and distribute access rights to that particular channel. And then the more people that are subscribed to that channel, the more value there is to broadcast on that channel. It really closes the economic utility and value of the token there. And these would be blockchains that aren't really opinionated on the content. All opinions about the validity of transactions or smart contracts would be implemented up a layer. The only thing the blockchain would be reaching consensus on is, aside from their own token balances, would be the data that is to be included in the block and the order in which it was received.
Cool. Yeah, that's a lot to wrap your brain around. But we're already looking ahead to Clarion 2.0 or the second version of Clarion. So yeah, maybe we can.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value that EOS token holders could get by funding such a project and then airdropping on EOS token holders. The cost of building that will be relatively small compared to the value of that blockchain. Even if it was only valued at 100 million, it's only going to cost millions to produce. So there's big multiples for the creation of these chains, assuming we get the developers and resources necessary to make it happen.
Why Clarion? Why now? Why is this so important?
No, the freedom of speech is on the decline all around the world. And in the past year, we've really seen it in action in very blatant and obvious ways. So much so that people not just deplatformed from one platform, but they're deplatformed from all platforms simultaneously, and their hosting providers and the app stores, which is a level of censorship that was inconceivable a couple of years ago, or like it was theoretical, right? You could think of it, but no company would dare risk their reputation to censor people solely based on political beliefs or opinions about medicine, right? Scientific research and inquiry. But now we're seeing that the big tech companies can't be trusted. And the only way that you can secure your freedom of speech is to make sure that your freedom of speech does not depend upon anyone else to exercise, which gets to a philosophy I I outline in my book, More Equal Animals, which is free from moreequalanimals.com. But in that, that philosophy is independence. You can't create freedom of speech as a service. You can only create tools that allow you to speak more freely. A ham radio is a tool for freedom of speech. A microphone or megaphone is a tool for freedom of speech. A service might help you reach people, but now you got a third party between you and the people you want to reach, and they have the ability and incentive to control who you can talk to and when, and what you can talk about. So, it's about, my philosophy right now is creating tools that people can use, and Clarion is a tool, not a service. It's not something like Steemit or Hive or Voice, where there's a company that is providing the service of web hosting for you, and if that company goes down, you don't have access anymore. Steemit is a little bit better, and Hive is a little bit better because you got multiple parties providing services, but you still have one blockchain with one governance on the blockchain, and if the blockchain governance kicks you out, that you no longer have the ability to use that service. So that's the key, is taking responsibility and maximizing individual independence by giving them tools that make them more productive, right? Just like giving someone a hammer, a knife, a computer, those tools make them more independent, makes them more free. Giving somebody software as a service makes them dependent. They don't get freedom.
Excellent. We've touched on a lot of different aspects of Clarion. Is there anything else that is on your mind that you've been thinking about that you want to share with the community while we have you here?
I'm super excited to be engaging with the EOS community and working on new governance processes that can utilize Clarion to help reach consensus about the direction to take the EOS network. So I expect there's going to be a lot more to talk about in the near future, and I thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe in the not too distant future, we can look forward to having a more in-depth conversation about EOS and community governance and such things, if you're into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm putting a lot of work on boiling the abstract ideas presented in More Equal Animals to concrete implementation as smart contracts on EOS. So I'll be releasing a paper on that shortly, and then we can do another video to introduce those concepts to the world.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for your time talking to us today, Dan. And I'll make sure all the links are below for the Clarion group and your book, of course, and everything else that people might want to look into to get more in-depth information on this project. So really exciting. I'm super thrilled to see where this goes. And yeah, thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you very much.